So tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit more about transforming your relationship to pain. I'm curious, did anyone have an opportunity to practice any of the techniques we did last week, over the course of the last week? Would anyone like to share anything about what you observed? Was it helpful? Not to put you on the spot, but if you'd be willing to. Yeah, that'd be great. We're going to bring a mic over to you. If you can hold it a little closer, great.
I found it very helpful to focus on the other parts of the body that were not hurting. And I think that seemed to be pretty easy to do and extremely successful for me. So it's almost the first time that I've practiced it again.
That's great. So you're kind of actively exploring the parts of your body that are not hurting.
Yeah, I'm trying to be everywhere but where it's hurting.
And what have you noticed as you've practiced that?
It goes away.
That the pain it'll actually go away.
Actually will go away. Now, this isn't, super terrible pain, but nevertheless, it makes me aware most of the time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's great.
we're real happy with that technique.
Wonderful. So this technique, for those who weren't here, or just to refresh it, is a very interesting technique where when you're experiencing physical pain, or even if there's strong emotions, then you can find a physical location of those emotions. It's an awareness that when you are stressed or afraid, we tend to fixate. The mind will fixate on the pain itself. Sensations show up in three categories. There's sensation that's unpleasant, sensation that's neutral, and sensation that's pleasant. And in this particular technique, you actually sort of train your mind to stay on the pleasant and the neutral, and not to fixate on the unpleasant. And it can be a very interesting shift. I'm so glad you had success with that. That's great. Yeah. It's very interesting when an interesting analogy I've found is that, let's say you've got 4 ounces of salt, and you put those 4 ounces of salt into a shot glass filled with water. That's going to be very, very salty water. If you take those same 4 ounces of salt and you put them into a lake, you won't be able to even detect the salt in the lake. So one way that you can work with pain is to create more space around it. When you're fixated, all you're experiencing is the pain. When you can successfully, and there's some interesting strategies, when you can shift your attention to the space, the pain almost can have a sense of being diluted. That's not to overpromise. Every time I give a Dharma talk, it seems like I have some related theme in my own life. So because we've been on pain for 2 weeks, I was treated to one of my ultra migraines this last weekend. So I thought, well, this is my opportunity to practice. And nothing I did made it go away. But I was able to shift my relationship to the pain pretty substantially. Anyone else? Anything you noticed in anything you might have practiced with pain, or any chronic pain that you're working with at this time? Well, let me review a little bit of what we explored, and then I'm hoping we'll try on a few experiences and take some time to share observations toward the end. Last week we started off exploring this phrase that pain in life is inevitable, but suffering in life is optional. That it's a recognition that it's not what's happening, but how you're relating to it. The second classic teaching in Buddhist philosophy is the principle of the second arrow. That when you experience physical pain, it's painful. But every time that the mind kind of fixates or obsesses or gets anxious or gets revengeful, it's like you're being stung by a second and a third and a fourth arrow. So you don't have control over the pain, What you do have some control over is how you're relating to it. So we explore through sort of classical mindfulness, learning how to calm the mind through concentration, looking at strategies of how you can sort of recognize the pain that's there, how you can explore what it means to open to it, which is a very counterintuitive thing, and then how to investigate it. This classic instruction of training yourself to move from fixating awareness to sort of non-fixating or open focus awareness is a very powerful strategy. And it's a very fundamental strategy for working with trauma. This is an oversimplification, but oftentimes when people are traumatized, and you might be working with someone who might specializes in working with trauma, is they might ask you, how you're feeling. And when you are in trauma, you're experiencing two fundamental things: fear and helplessness. That's kind of the definition of trauma. There's big trauma and there's little trauma. Oftentimes what happens is you're overwhelmed with the trauma response. And classically, an oversimplification, either when you feel fear and helplessness, you will react out of a sense of fight, kind of an unconscious aggression, or flight, disassociation, moving away, or some form of freezing, kind of freezing up inside. When you're investigating this, you might be asked, where in your body don't you feel the trauma? It's a very powerful shift. And what's very interesting is that most people will find when they really examine where they don't feel it, it'll be the nose, kind of the tip of the nose. It's really curious. When I've done this with people, invariably people say, well, for some reason I'm not feeling it in my nose. Or it might be the feet or the hands. And then part of the instruction of working with that trauma is to learn how to establish that place where you don't feel it as a resource state, as a place that you can go back to. That sort of becomes your home base where you're okay there. And then you can explore what's called pendulation or titration. It's a very interesting exploration. With titration, it's sort of like you might return your awareness to the trauma and just let yourself come to the very edge of it, just to feel the edge of the traumatic sensation. As soon as it feels like it's too much, you'll go back to where you don't feel it, back to your resource state. The other option is kind of what's called pendulation, where you're sort of like, you'll swing into it, you'll sort of feel it and swing back to that place where it's okay. Sort of swing into it, swing back. And inevitably what happens is that people report that when they explore their trauma, if they try and be with it all in one big chunk, it's way too much. But in tiny little bites, they can be with it. In tiny little pieces, just to feel the edge, I can do that. And then I can go back, and it feels maybe a little bit different the next time I go back. It's a fascinating way of exploring how we can recover our nervous system. We can kind of recover the body when we experience pain. So this idea of distinguishing between pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensation, sort of training yourself to sort of hang out in the pleasant and the neutral and then explore what happens when you do that, is one particular strategy. Another strategy we explored was actually feeling more of the space, imagining the space inside the body. And we'll kind of refresh that practice a little bit. When we practice meditation, in this particular tradition, in Vipassana or insight, our primary anchor is the body. The fundamental instruction is to come back to the body, come back to the senses. And of course, we begin to see how challenging that is. how the mind is constantly driving into the future or reviewing the past. And we also get to really begin to see in subtler and subtler levels your patterns of resistance. That you will bring your attention back to the body and then you're not there. What is going on with that? And particularly when you encounter something unpleasant, the natural instinct of your nervous system is to move away from the pain. Pain is actually a signal. It's actually a messenger, and a really helpful messenger. And back in how many generations back, the people who ate those red berries, well, they're not around anymore. But the ones who paid attention and watched the other people eating the red berries and didn't, we're the product, we're sort of the spawn of some very paranoid generations before us. Someone described it, we have a nervous system. We're designed to scan for pain. So when pain arises in the physical body, everything in you will want to move away from that pain. And yet there's something in the pain which can be a very powerful teacher. Can be some very, very powerful lessons in there. There's a kind of a classic poem by Khalil Gibran. He was asked to speak on pain. And he said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink the remedy in silence and tranquility. For the physician's hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burn your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears." When it's possible to actually investigate pain, we can open up some very powerful insights. Again, nothing in us wants to experience pain. But when we can meet it, new possibilities open up. So the question becomes, how do we do this? How do we set the stage for investigation of pain? First, it requires a sense of willingness and intentionality. It requires a capacity to sort of let go of expectations. It requires a quality of concentration, an ability to stay with difficulty when you don't want to stay there. It requires some energy, because pain is exhausting. And to do transformative work, if you don't have the juice in the tank, you're not going to be able to make it happen. It requires a quality of mindfulness, of non-judging awareness. So I thought what we might do would be to do a little exploration in a particular form of using concentration to draw your attention into the here and now, to open to the sensations in the body, and just to explore what might be there. Now, in the exploration of pain, it can be really challenging if you're feeling good. So what you can do, just to kind of try this on, is to just to explore where the sensations are the most predominant. And you may find that when you turn your attention on those sensations, that they'll shift, they might melt, they might move. Then you can just shift your attention to somewhere else where you feel some predominant sensation. Also, before we move into this inquiry, it's important to note that physical pain, emotional pain, and sort of mental turmoil are all tied in together. The mind doesn't exist without the body doesn't exist without the mind. So what you could do in this next little meditation is you might think of something that might be troubling you emotionally, and to sense if you can locate the sensations, the feelings that are associated with that particular emotion or intense mental state. And we'll see what happens. So if you like, you can close your eyes. You might want to stretch your body for a moment. And as a way of concentrating the mind, you might kind of return your attention again to this technique of long, slow, deep breath, matching the inhalation with the exhalation. This is a willful form of practice. Maybe a slow breath in to the count of 4, slow breath out to the count of 4. The first part of this practice will be exploring what we could call embodied presence. And you might notice the effect of this technique. The benefit of this technique is calming and relaxing. The more one-pointed the mind is, the more it can draw the attention into the here and now. And just for a few more rounds of breath, how intimately can you feel all the details? And now retaining the long, full inhalation. On the exhalation, you might explore a relaxing. Letting the breath just fall away, leave the body naturally. So it's a willful in-breath and an inquiry into surrender on the out-breath. You might now release control of the breath and let your awareness move into an inquiry into relaxation. The forehead smooth, the base of the tongue relaxing down into the throat. Sensing if there might be a softening or opening in the lower belly. Letting your awareness now explore the realm of feeling. Can you feel or imagine the space inside your thumbs? Can you feel or imagine the space inside your index fingers? Can you feel or imagine the space between your fingers and thumbs? Can you feel or imagine the aliveness of senses in the fingertips and palms and thumbs? Any tingling, vibration, pulse, subtle energy? And can you feel or imagine the space inside your throat? And can you feel or imagine the space inside your lungs and your heart, just sensing the aliveness there? And can you feel or imagine the space in the belly, the space between your navel and your spine, sensing the aliveness there? Is it possible to imagine the space through which the sounds pass through? And can you imagine or feel this sense of embodied presence, this perception of space as being effortless? Over the next few minutes, you might sense if you can distinguish in this realm of space and sensation, sensations which are unpleasant, sensations which you find pleasant, and those you find neutral. And if just for a few minutes, letting your awareness flow freely through all the regions you find neutral and pleasant. we're going to do a little inquiry into the experience of unpleasant sensation. If no sensations are particularly unpleasant, you can hang out with the sensations which are the most predominant. Or if there is some issue which might have an emotional charge, you might reflect on that issue and just notice if some felt sense begins to form on the inside. And sensing if it's possible to simply meet the unpleasant or predominant sensations, to simply meet them as they are, as if you're keeping them company. I'll be offering a series of questions, and some of these questions may not resonate at all for you. Others might have some resonance. When you examine or investigate the sensations that are the most predominant right now, can you discern a shape or a color or a size to those sensations? You might imagine the point of view or the perspective from the point of the sensation or the felt sense. Does it have some mood or some emotion? Is it angry or shy? Does this felt sense or sensation change if you offer it some kindness or some empathy or compassion? And can you track how it changes? Is there a sense of how this sensation, however it may be now, it may have changed dramatically, is there a sense of how it wants you to be with it right now? If this felt sense was like a child that didn't have words to describe its experience, can you determine what it needs in order to feel more whole? And can you offer that? Can you track how it might move or shift or change? We'll take just another minute or so. You might release any technique or kind of stay with whatever is unfolding in your experience. And you might lengthen the in-breath, and on the out-breath, just let this fall away. And when you're ready, you can let the body move or shift. And when you're ready, you can open the eyes or remain with the eyes closed. So did anyone feel a shift in sensations in that investigation at all? A little bit? Yeah. Any observations of what you noticed or what worked or what didn't work in that experience? It's always fun to try and describe your experience right after meditation. Yeah, thank you. We're going to bring a mic over to you. Wow. So you encountered something that was really sharp, kind of like a diamond, and then with sort of the invitation to be with it, you sort of, your interpretation was to offer it some kindness. And then it began to change. It began to shrink. That's great. Yeah. And anything happened after that? So it just sort of, it just shifted and disbanded. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Thank you. You know, it's really interesting because when we really begin to explore the body, you've heard me share this many times, but there's the classic phrase that a lot of massage therapists use as their byline: your issues are in your tissues. You know, all of your trauma, all of your stress, it's in the body. How do we access that? Usually the only way we begin to pay attention is when we're in chronic pain, because we're so good at overriding it. And we live in a culture that says if you're feeling pain, buy these wonderful pharmaceuticals and everything will go away. And of course what happens is the longer you go ignoring those signals, the more and more chronic the pain will become. So as we begin to explore these embodied practices, the more we really begin to see this line between what we're aware of and what we're not aware of. And then the question becomes, how does the body communicate? Because here we have consciousness and this whole realm of sensation. And I found for myself in kind of what I call body-centered inquiry, that when we can really bring our attention to those sensations, you know, that for you, when you begin to sense, well, is there a color? You're trying to find language that allows you to communicate with it. And by simply being with it, it began to shift. And kind of sensing it as fear. Yeah. That's wonderful. Now, a lot of times, pain is too hard to be with. And it's important to recognize that. And I found, for example, when my headaches, when my migraines are really, really intense, it's all I can do to be with them. And then the strategy becomes, how can I be with this in a way that allows me to not be in fear? And the technique that I will use is a concentration practice. Either I'll be focusing on long, slow, deep breaths, but more often I'll do a yogic pranayama, where I'll do alternate nostril breathing, where I'll breathe in through one nostril and hold, and exhale through the opposite nostril. If you've done some yoga, you'll be familiar with that technique. It becomes a very interesting strategy for me to sort of bear the pain, to stay with it without becoming too agitated, without adding that sort of second and third arrow. So the practice of investigation, of really sensing how you can be with the pain when it's there. There are many, many different strategies, but this particular strategy of first sensing, where don't you feel it? That will automatically begin to open the field a little bit. As I mentioned before, when I have a migraine and I do that practice, I'll begin to realize this is only 18% of my body. The rest of me is actually okay. And that can dilute the pain a little bit. Sometimes, not all the time. The sense of actively looking through two lenses. In mindfulness, we talk about two essential lenses. One is the lens of wisdom. And when we're doing the exploration of pain in the body, that's finding the location. Where exactly is that sensation? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color I can discern? That brings you into intimate contact with where it resides in the body. And that alone can sometimes create a sense of freedom or a sense of liberation. The second lens is vital, and this is the lens of compassion, sensing what it means to be kind, to offer empathy to that sensation. And quite often in my experience, when we can explore that lens, the sensation will begin to move and shift. It'll begin to disband in some way. Not all the time, but some of the time. And then to really sense that one of the deepest questions in my practice, particularly when it comes to working with pain, is to sort of imagine the point of view of that felt sense. Does this feeling, what's the mood, what's the emotion of this feeling? It can create a little bit more of an intimate contact with it. And then the real question is, how does this want me to be with it right now? And you might sense what it really needs is for me just to leave it alone. Or maybe what it needs is for me to drink some water. Or maybe it really wants me just to lie down. Or maybe it wants a little bit of kindness. That intimate feedback loop will begin to bring you into a deeper sense of sensing the need behind the sensation that's there. So there's a Zen teacher who talked about another strategy, which I wanted to name just in our remaining minutes. And she said this: the most powerful tool I've found for mitigating pain's impact is a short meditative formula repeated many times in the Buddha's discourse. Whatever feelings there may be, past, present, or future, all feeling is not mine, not I, not myself. This is this essential teaching where the Buddha said, do not cling to anything as I or mine. When you're in pain, chances are you're taking it very personally. It's my pain. When it's at all possible to drop the my and simply experience the pain for what it is, once again you move from the tight contraction to an opening to the space that is containing the pain. Not at all easy, but it can be a very, very powerful practice. So I thought we might close with just a short little meditation on that reflection. So if you like, once again, you can close your eyes. You might like to feel the movement of the breath. And just sensing, sort of contemplating the following phrases. This is not my body. These are not my thoughts. These are not my feelings. Imagine if just for a moment who you are in the absence of the concept of I and mine. Sensations arise and fall away. Thoughts arise and fall away. Sensations, moods, states arise and fall away. Can you feel or imagine the space inside your thumbs? Can you feel or imagine the space inside your lungs as you breathe? Is it possible to imagine the space inside your body? Can you imagine the space outside your body? And is it possible, if just for a moment, to feel or imagine the space inside your body and the space outside your body as one continuous space? Gently deepening the breath. As you're ready, letting the eyes open. So the next time pain comes to visit you, whether it be physical, emotional, mental pain, it can be helpful to recognize that pain is a messenger. That if it's possible to slow down, to recognize it, to let it know you see it. If it's possible to open, to allow, to investigate it, to create space for it. Oftentimes it can be a provider of insight. If nothing else, perhaps one of the most powerful ways of being with pain is from the Tonglen tradition, to remember other people feel this too. It's a very powerful way of opening your heart to the pain that you're feeling, to realize that whatever you are feeling, whether it be pain or whether it be exaltation, other people feel this too. It's a shared experience. So thank you for your time and your attention. You may have more questions than ever about this than when we started, but